we're going to do section 6.1.3 out of our textbook for algebra, and it's called Systems. And I want to start you out here with kind of an example problem. So go ahead and write this down in your notes if you're watching the video and kind of taking some notes. And our first example is going to be a story problem. So here we have a problem. I'm going to read it to you. Go ahead and write it down. It's probably a good idea to write this down. And pause the video if you need to, if I go too fast. So example 1, a 100-foot cable is cut into 2 pieces. So you have this 100-foot cable that we're going to cut into 2 pieces. The first piece is 18 feet longer than the second piece. How long is each piece? So here's what we're going to do. Pause the video and write this down if you didn't get the story, but let's get into the story here. We have this 100-foot cable. I'm going to draw it on here. Here's the cable. It goes from here to here. And it's 100 feet long, so the whole entire thing is 100 feet. And somebody comes along and decides that they're going to cut the cable. They're going to find a spot and cut it. So like, let's say they cut it right here. Well, now you have 2 pieces of cable. You have the first piece is 18 feet longer than the second piece. So here's the first piece, here's the second piece. Together they make 100 feet. We want to figure out how long is each piece if the first piece is 18 feet longer than the second piece. So one really good strategy to this word problem might be just to kind of guess and check. And we've always learned how to do guess and check with a table. So let's try that. Let's set up a guess and check problem. Let's try and figure out what the first, second piece, what the measurements would be. So pause the video and try it. Set up your table. Take 5 minutes to do this. Okay, so here's what you should have done. We've got a table. We're going to measure how long is the first piece, how long is the second piece, and what's the grand total. And you know that the first piece is 18 feet longer than the second piece. So if I thought, oh, I think the second piece is 50 feet long. Well, that means the first piece must have been 18 feet more, so that would have made it 68 feet. I guess I don't need to write feet, but 68. And does that add up to be 100 like I'd like? No, unfortunately it adds up to 118. It's too big. 118 is way too big. So you got to make other guesses. You got to go through your guess and check process until you can figure out the right number. So let's guess something smaller, like how about 42? What is 18 plus 42? So 18 plus 42 is going to be 60. And 60 and 42 add up to 102. So close, really, really close. So let's try another number here. Let's try 41. 18 plus 41, that'd be 59. And 59 plus 41 added together is 100. There it is. Awesome. So the answer to our question is the first piece is 59 feet long and the second piece is 41 feet long. Remember that picture we drew earlier of the cable? I could write on here that this piece, what did we get? We got 59 and 41. So this is 59 feet here and this is 41 feet here. And that'd be my answer. So what if you're like, I don't want to guess and check. I want to do it a different way. Or what if I had told you this cable's not 100 feet long, but it's 5,724 feet long? Well, now guess and check seems a little silly. So we have a second way of doing this problem. Instead of making a table, we could have solved the problem using algebra. And algebra means we're going to turn this into something with variables in it. So here's kind of my steps of how to solve a word problem with algebra. There's a couple steps we go through. So step 1, and I would write this down. Step 1 is to look at the story and write out the important facts. What are the important things, the important numbers that kind of stand out to us? So when I read the story, the facts that really stood out to me is that we have 2 pieces, a first piece and a second piece of wire. And one is longer than the other. So we're going to write the first is 18 feet longer than the second. The first is 18 feet longer than the second piece. That was the major fact out of the story that kind of stood out to me. So how do we turn this story into an algebra problem? Well, step 2, we need variables. we need to define some variables for our problem. Yesterday, the last 2 days in class, that's what we've been working on, is how to define variables. So let's do some defining. We've got the first piece of the cable to solve for and the second piece of the cable to solve for. So those are our variables. Let x equal the first piece of the cable, and let y equal the second piece of our cable. So let x equal the first piece of our cable, let y equal the second piece of our cable. Okay? So we got variables. Now we go to step 3, where we need some equations so we can solve for these variables. So step 3, we're going to come up with some equations. And this is the hardest step. I mean, people really get stuck on this step because, yeah, you can figure out x and y. X is the first piece of cable. I'm going to write cable up here. And y is the second piece of cable. But we have to write an equation, and that is never very easy. So I'm going to try and go through how would I write an equation. So I'm thinking this. First off, the first piece of cable plus the second piece of cable makes up how many feet altogether? Well, there's 100 feet of cable. So the first piece is x plus the second piece is y equals 100 feet of cable altogether. That's one of my equations. I can totally do that as an equation. The other part of the equation is going to come from this fact up here that the first is 18 feet longer than the second. Seems like we should write an equation about that. So the first piece is 18 longer than the second. So the first piece is called x, and it's going to equal the same size as the second piece plus 18 more, y plus 18. Remember when we were doing our guess and check table earlier that we would take the number from the second piece, and to get this piece we would add 18 to it. Well, now that's what we're doing with our equation. We're adding 18 to the y piece. So I'm going to work with those. I'm going to see if I can take those equations, and I can go down to step 4 here. And step 4 is going to be let's solve. Let's do what we've been learning in class, and let's solve these equations. So we got it all the way down to here, down to this step. Now let's solve for x and y. So I need some space. Let's see, I need to clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to take this whole top part. Okay, so step 4, solve. Let's start with this. We're going to look at this problem and realize that it's definitely one of these newer problems that we call the bubble method or substitution. We have x all by itself here equals y plus 18. So I'm going to bubble. X is equal to y plus 18. They're equal to each other, which means I can take that other equation where the matching x is right here, and I can replace it. Instead of writing x plus y equals 100, I can write this. I can write something plus y equals 100. And instead of putting x inside of there, x plus y equals 100, I'm going to put this thing. I'm going to put y plus 18. Y plus 18 plus another y equals 100. Let's put a line down the middle and solve this equation. So we have a parenthesis that represents where we plugged in our value for x, but now is there a number out here that we need to distributive property? And there's really not. So if there's no number out in front here to arrow in, there's no distributive property to do, then forget the parenthesis. Let's just rewrite it as y plus 18 plus another y equals 100. And I see y plus y, and I realize there's two y's, so 2y's plus 18 equals 100. Let's subtract the 18 to the other side, so minus 18. So we get 2y's equals 100 minus 18, so 100 minus 18 is going to be 82. 2y equals 82, and we're going to divide by 2 on both sides. Divide by 2, divide by 2. And 82 divided by 2 is 41. So we get y equals 41. Now, isn't that exactly what we got when we did our table earlier? Remember our guess and check table? We got y equals 41 feet. That's how long the cable was. So exact same answer, different way of getting it. Now, we haven't answered the whole question because we're supposed to figure out both of these answers, 59 and 41. So we just did all this work and we solved for y. what I often do is once I get all that work kind of figured out, I'm going to clean this up a little bit here. Now what I can do is say, okay, let's move that work over, and now let's go solve for the x, because we never got an answer for x. So now I'm going to write solve for x. And to solve for x, you can go back and pick one of the old equations. Either one works. I find the bubble one, the second one, is usually the easier one for me to use because I actually know the equation, and it's x equals y plus 18. And now I know that I think the answer for y is 41. So right here where the y is, I'm going to put the answer 41 in there. I'm going to write x equals 41 plus 18. 41 plus 18. And 41 plus 18 is going to be 59. There it is. There's our two answers. Our cable is 59 feet and 41 feet. That's our first and our second piece. And so sometimes we can write our answer with a parenthesis around it as a point. So like this. We got 59, comma 41 as our two answers. And we're all done. Now this way might seem like a really long process, but the better and better you get at it, the quicker and quicker this is. Compared to like a guess and check table, sometimes you can guess and check over and over and over again, and it takes a really long time to get your answer. So we're going to practice. This is what we're going to do. Here's some solving system problems without the story. No more story problems for today. One story problem is enough. It kind of takes a while. So now I just want to solve for x and y. I've got two equations up here, and we're practicing, how do you do these problems? How do you solve for x and y? So what do you bubble? And in this problem, I see I've got x minus 2y equals 6. So x minus 2y equals 6, and I have y equals 11 minus 3x. So we're going to write those down. Totally know what I'm going to bubble in this problem. I see y equals, I see y all by itself, so I'm going to circle it, and I realize y equals 11 minus 3x, so 11 minus 3x is all of this. And that's what I'm going to be substituting in. So take that other equation that's on top, x minus 2y equals 6. That's the equation that's kind of all messed up. If y is equal to 11 minus 3x, then I'm going to circle this y, and I'm actually just going to change it into 11 minus 3x. So I get this new equation. Instead of x minus 2, I have x minus 2, 11 minus 3x equals 6. That's my setup. And now I can, throw a line down the middle and do all my solving for x steps that we already know how to do. And you know that the negative 2 is going to distributive property in. And we're going to have negative 2 times 11 is negative 22. Negative 2 times a minus 3x becomes a positive 6x. And there's this x out in front. So x minus 22 plus 6x equals 6. Let's solve this thing. 6x and x makes 7x's minus 22 equals 6. I'm going to add the 22 over to the other side. So add the 22 over to here, which means 6 and 22 makes 28. So 7x equals 28. And then I'm going to divide by 7 on both sides, and I see my answer is 28 divided by 7, and 28 divided by 7 is 4. So I get x is equal to 4. Bam, there's my answer. Usually what people do is they think they're done at this point. They're like, I solved for x, I did all this work. I mean, look how nice it looks on the screen. Well, we still need to solve for y. So don't forget to go back and solve for y. And usually I do that over on the side. So here is my solve for y. And to solve for y, you're going to go back and copy one of the older equations. So go back up to the start here, up at the very top corner, and pick one of the equations to use. The bubbled one, the y equals 11 minus 3x, is probably the easier equation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and just put my answer in. I got x equals 4 over here, so I'm going to circle the x, and I'm going to put a 4 in for x. So instead of 11 minus 3x, I'm going to have 11 minus 3 times 4 is equal to y. And now you just got to do the math. 11 minus 3 times 4 is 12. So 11 minus 12 equals y, and 11 minus 12 is negative 1. So y is equal to -1. And now I got my two answers. X equals 4, y equals -1. And I'm all set and done. So why don't you guys try the next one? Pause the video and see if you can solve this system. Here are your two problems. X equals 1 minus y and 3x minus y equals 11. Pause the video and give it a try. Alright, so here's what you should have done. We're going to go through it now. You should have noticed that the x is all by itself and it's equal to 1 minus y. So we're going to bubble those two. Which means if x is equal to 1 minus y, I'm going to take the x that matches it in the second equation and basically replace it with 1 minus y. I'm going to substitute it in. So instead of a 3x, I'm going to have 3 times 1 minus y equals 11. I'm going to change it into that. Then I'm going to put a line down the middle and I'm going to solve. So starting with, let's multiply the 3 in here, arrow it into both of these. So 3 times 1 is 3, minus 3 times y is 3y, minus y equals 11. 3y minus another y is minus 4y. So I have 3 minus 4y equals 11. Flip that 3 over, get the 3 to the other side, so it's a -3. And 11 minus 3 is 8, so we get 8. And the 3 is gone. And now we just have a minus 4y equals 8. Note that it's a minus 4. A lot of people forget that. And then divide by -4 on both sides. And 8 divided by -4 is 8 divided by 4 is 2, so we're going to have -2. So our answer is y equals -2. All set. Now am I done? Hopefully you're saying no, I'm not done. I still need to solve for x. I solved for y, now I gotta go solve for x. So let's go solve for x because I need to make sure I get both answers. So to solve for x, you're gonna go back and pick an equation. I'm gonna pick the first equation up in the top corner here. I'm gonna pick x equals 1 minus y from the very start. And now that I think I have an answer for y, I think it's -2, I'm gonna take this y and change it into a -2. So instead of, this one's kind of hard, instead of 1 minus y, we're going to have 1 minus -2. X equals 1 minus -2. And two negative signs, the minus negative, are going to turn into a positive. So we're going to have 1 plus 2. X is equal to 1 plus 2. And 1 plus 2 is 3. And that's why this one's kind of a hard one. People forget the two negative signs. So we get an answer of 3 and -2. So I'm going to write 3, -2. Those are my two answers. One of them's x, one of them's y. I'm going to leave it just like that. All right. So one more problem here. Solve this system. Now we're going to do one with a's and c's. So a equals -17 minus 5c, and 3a minus 4c equals 6. Pause the video and try this one. See if you can get this one right. This time when I go to bubble, I notice that a is all by itself. So a is going to get circled, and it's equal to all of this stuff, -17 minus 5c. So in the second equation, I go and I find the matching a, and I replace it. I'm going to turn it into -17 minus 5c. So -17 minus 5c is going to go right there. So instead of having the 3a that I had earlier, now I'm going to have 3 times -17 minus 5c. Then I got to copy the rest of this equation over here. So I have minus 4c equals 6. Okay, there it is, line down the middle. That's the thing I want to solve. So I'll multiply the 3 in. We're going to do times 3 times 3. 3 times -17 is going to be a negative, and 3 times 17 is 51. Minus 3 times 5 is 15c. Minus 4c equals 6. So that's going to be kind of my setup. And I'm thinking, let's put the c's together. -15 and -4 is -19c equals 6. And I have a -51 out in front. Let's flip the 51 over to this side. So I'm going to add the 51 over. And 51 plus 6 is 57. So we get 57 and -19c. We still have a -19. So I'm going to divide by -19 here and try and get an answer. So divide by -19, divided by negative 19. And 57 divided by 19 is 3. So we're going to have a negative 3 here. So C equals negative 3. There it is. That's our answer. C is equal to negative 3. So am I done? No, I still got to go solve for A. I needed A and C. So let's go over here and solve for A. Solve for A. And this time to solve for A, I'm going to go copy one of the equations from the very start up here in the corner. At the very beginning, it's one of those two that you're going to copy. And I'm going to start with the first one. I'm going to do A equals negative 17 minus 5C. And we got an answer. We think C down here at the bottom is negative 3. So where the C is right here, I'm going to put in a negative 3. So I'm going to have A equals negative 17 minus 5 times negative 3. And 5 times 3 is 15. And a negative times a negative is positive 15. So I get negative 17. A equals negative 17 plus 15, which is going to be negative 2. So A is equal to negative 2. And now I got my two answers, negative 2 and negative 3. That's A and C. So I'm going to write it like this. I'm going to write negative 2, comma negative 3, and put it in a little parenthesis. And there's my answer to my system. So this method that we're doing, this circling and bubbling, it's called the substitution method, and it's just practicing solving for two variables, an x and a y, or in this case, an a and a c. So I hope that helps.